Everyone wanted to know what's going on with the Penn State offensive line. Everyone wanted to know, why is this happening for Penn State football? So I did a very, very deep dive into the Penn State recruiting efforts along the offensive line to try and find some answers. So if you're going to do recruiting, you bring on Ryan Snyder to help you fill in the gaps of basically all of the things. So Ryan, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on and appreciate you doing this today.
Of course, man. It's an important topic. Everybody's asking about it.
So what I'd like to do is I've gone back since 2016 to look at all of the recruiting classes, the offensive line in particular specifically, about what Penn State's been able to do along the offensive line. That goes back to now it will include every offensive line coach recruiting at least one class for Penn State football under James Franklin, to see if we can find some themes, see if we can find some common threads. And my theory is, the year you're hired, that's not necessarily your class. You're keeping together a class that the other guy recruited, and then the next year being your first year. Does that make sense? Is that a fair way to look at that?
Yeah, of course. Yep.
Okay. So, for example, here we go. 2016. I went back to 2016 because this is the first and only class for Herb Hand that was individually his before he left Penn State. And it also is important because it made up the bulk of the offensive line for Penn State under James Franklin during the majority of the time we're looking at. From Michael Mennett, Will Fries, Connor McGovern, these guys were the players that made a big impact for Penn State recruiting. And what I found looking through all of these different classes and all these different recruiting efforts by Penn State is that they've missed on one key thing that's led to them having the situation they did in 2020, is that they can't seem to consistently get top 250 tackles, tackle prospects specifically. Now, when you look at the breadth of where things kind of went off the rails, we were talking about 2017. Can you tell us, fill us in a little bit of what you saw in 2017 from the recruiting efforts for Penn State?
It was a so-so class, I guess you could say. I mean, they certainly missed out on a few guys, but, of course, having C.J. Thorpe not really work out as well, and, Robert Martin didn't really pan out. I mean, I think that was the bulk of where your issues are. I mean, when those guys were prospects, coming out, I thought they were pretty good. And, yeah, there, as you put on the graphic there, of course, neither were true tackles. So that's kind of where you start, right? I mean, the tackle issue seems to be the one that everybody's talking about, and I think it's a theme as we go through this.
The thing that I've noticed, too, is that interior offensive line hasn't been a problem. Penn State's gotten high-quality players, even if they haven't worked out. I mean, that's kind of a thing that, when it comes to the best players in the country, anyone can, not anyone, but lots of people can play on the interior, but it's those guys that can play on the perimeter. Because, again, Michael Mennett was a top 100 player in the country, was a longtime starter for Penn State, but those guys on the outside have really eluded Penn State. Going into 2018, the background of this class, this was really the best offensive line group that Penn State was able to put together, but there's some issues here that are just really unfortunate for Penn State, especially with the two guys in the middle of the list. What was the story with Penn State's 2018 class?
Well, I mean, it depends. So are you talking about specifically like with missing out on tackles, or who they missed out on? Is that what you mean by that?
Well, there was a couple of injury issues, couple of medical issues with the players in this class that I think really kind of set up Penn State in a rough position.
Yeah, well, of course, Asiatu, of course, he, I believe he was a heart condition. And Jordan Minor, I think, was in that same class. And both of those guys were unable to, give it a go, which was really unfortunate. I mean, Nana was considered one of the best offensive tackle prospects in the country at the time. I believe he was, what we have in there as 110 national. I believe, like some sites had him, a little higher than that. I mean, he was considered, I know, certainly one of the top 10 or so offensive tackles. And then, of course, you're missing out on, Juice Scruggs. His development was really delayed too. I'm trying to think who they missed out. Jalen Duncan was somebody they went after for Maryland. Chris Blake, he ended up at Florida and then moved around a little bit. He was another one they missed out on. But yeah, having Asiatu, miss out the way he did, because of that heart condition, really set them back for sure.
So before we go any further, I want to get your perspective on this topic in general, just kind of the broad view of where you think Penn State has been when it comes to recruiting the offensive line, and how you think that informed James Franklin's decisions over time with offensive line coach and some of the decisions they've made.
I think it's incredibly difficult to recruit tackles. I think like people simplify it as if like, oh, why don't you have more tackles? Well, there's a standard. There's a standard of if they're just recruiting long guys who aren't really maybe what you want to see on film. That really narrows the gap. I mean, you just do they use this all the time, but do a Google search. How many 6'4", 260-pound people are out there in the world, and then also, by the way, they're athletic enough to play tackle, and it's an extremely narrow window, and all the best of them are being coveted by the best schools in the country. So it's certainly a spot that they have missed out on. We can go through some of these lists, and they've clearly have tried to find the 6'4", not really the 6'5", 6'5", 6'6" kind of guy. But rather that kind of tweener, and then have hoped that some of them kind of pan out, and it hasn't exactly kind of panned out that way, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the indicative of the situation that they're in right now, is that you've got a lot of guys that during their development process, if you're going for guys that have position flexibility, sometimes it doesn't necessarily work out at tackle. So that's why Penn State fans and some of the people that have talked to us, especially if you want to subscribe to Blue White Illustrated, you can ask us these questions directly. And people that have talked to Ryan and I have said they just keep recruiting interior linemen, but the position flexibility is a big thing for Penn State because of what you just talked about, right? Like they specifically are looking for those guys if they can't get these top 250 players, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, for example, in 2018. There were some late guys like, is it DeJuan Jones, I believe. He ended up at Ohio State. They were really pushing for him. There was a couple others. I'm trying to think who comes to mind. Walter Rouse, he ended up at Stanford. He was a guy they were really pushing for in 2018. Missed out on him. Trying to think, Darian Dalcourt. He was more of a guard, though. I don't think he's a good example. Doug Nestor in 2018 ended up at Virginia Tech. He was a guy they really could have used in that class. But yeah, man. I mean, when you miss out on those 3 or 4 elite guys, and then it kind of snowballs a little bit for a couple years, you're plugging gaps with guys who certainly fit the interior better.
Yeah, this is. I guess what brought all of this up to me, and some of the guys you were mentioning here that Penn State was going after in that class, what brought it up in my mind was watching Penn State and Phil Trautwein push so hard to get so many tackle prospects this year. And something that you said to me earlier in just working on recruiting and some of the things is that if you're not a tackle, you're not necessarily always ranked so highly. So are all these guys that we're talking about, are they all tackles, or are these just, does it end up being that tackle is short for top 250 or some of the best players in the country?
No, I mean, there are top guys. I mean, Landon Tangwall still, yeah, he wasn't a 5-star, but he was still considered a top, 50 or so prospect. So I just think that the tackle position, again, I mean, it comes back to what I was saying. It's so narrow for the very best. Okay, I mean, you're asking for something that's very rare in this world, which is to find big humans who are incredibly athletically gifted.
Yep,
and that's why, I mean, you see usually, the top handful of tackles are ranked higher than the top handful of guards. And I'll be curious. Like, this is kind of getting off topic, but I'll be curious to see Alex Birchmeier is going to be someone to really watch with that, because he is an incredible offensive line prospect. But I bet he doesn't finish as high as some tackles, and he may be even a better prospect. But it's just how coveted they are. And of course, when you're doing these lists, you're trying to project on who will end up in the NFL. I mean, that's why you have 5-star players, right? That's why you normally see 32 5-stars, 32 first-round draft picks. That's kind of the mindset with that. So. Yeah. We're getting a little off topic there, of course, but
no, it's important. It's informing exactly. I think the point that I found going into this is exactly what you're saying, is that not only are these players rare, they're highly coveted, and there's very, very, very select number of them that even when you do get one, they end up working out, because Rasheed Walker is a top 100 player who throughout his career showed promise, but I don't think ever delivered necessarily on that particular promise. So the idea is get players like that every year, and that's the level James Franklin is talking about. This is in detail the level that James Franklin is talking about, of trying to get to the next level, compete on a higher level for Penn State football. And this stuff, I think in 2019, before Penn State made a move, in 2020, before Penn State made a move to Phil Trautwein, you can see that after 2018, things kind of went downhill, where Penn State's missing, and they're taking now guys that you described before, of guys that maybe don't have the physical profile of somebody who is going to be a 5-star tackle, but have the size and length and can develop into that, which is another thing that I think people are talking about. They haven't done that. Olu might play in the bowl game, so we might see the fruits of those labors, but they are incredibly delayed when it comes to especially the offensive line. You can see on this list the number of guys that they went after and the guys that had committed before they decommitted and went other places. So I think it's just a more complex picture than people are depicting when it comes to the offensive line and some of the efforts that go in there. Because even good places that develop offensive linemen and have a knack for it and have a reputation for it, like in Iowa, they're not developing all-around players. They're developing guys that are very good at one thing, but might not be the complete prospect. And that's what Penn State, correct me if I'm wrong, that's what Penn State's looking for, is guys that can do both. They can pass protect and be good run blockers, and that's the rub of where they're trying to fill this issue of scarcity and some of the misses that they're trying to overcome from previous years.
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely say that they recruit for versatility, and then I think that they want to narrow the window when they get them here. Just because, again, I mean, you have 5 offensive linemen, right? I mean, you need... I mean, it's one of the most, obviously it's, there's more offensive linemen than any other position out there, right? So it's one of those spots where, a few guys aren't going to pan out. So if you recruited 2 really good right guards, and one of them's versatile enough, that's kind of the mindset. And then but you have to develop after that too. And obviously, we that's taken some time here. No, there's no doubt about that. But, I mean, I this is an incredibly difficult subject for me to really kind of get into, just because I do feel like there's some guys there. Like I think Olu Fashanu is going to be a really good player. I really do. I think it needs time. This is an incredibly hard position that takes time, to develop. But this is also why, Andy Frank talked to us last week about how the transfer portal and offensive linemen are probably going to be hand in hand every year, just because they know that they can go out and get guys who are established already. It's a lot easier to fill a gap with a transfer portal player than obviously a high school player coming in.
I said this on a previous show. That's what the NFL does as well. Certain teams that if they've missed a couple times, they'll just go trade for a veteran, send a 5th-round pick out there for a guy that has proven track record that might fit your salary cap structure better. And not to make a comparison that I think fans are still uncomfortable with when it comes to the transfer portal, but it's kind of the same subject of, okay, it is very hard to hit on 5 offensive linemen. Even the best lines that you're thinking of, they're not all great football players. They have a couple of really good ones and a couple of ones that are good at football, but not these. There are no lines that have 5 exceptional NFL players, and when you do, it's an absolute rarity. So it's about getting the average up. Do you think Penn State has been trending in that way with some of the classes they've signed recently?
I would have told you that in 2018. I mean, this is the thing about recruiting, right? I mean, I would have told you that in 2019 too, and so on and so forth. It's just, you got to see it on the field. And before I'm going to say, I mean, I do feel really good about Drew Shelton. I think Drew Shelton is going to be a solid prospect. I've seen him twice in person now. He does a lot of little things right. I think technically he's ahead of a lot of guys. And then JB Nelson fits that mold of, a road grader, somebody they need. He seems to be stronger than the Lackawanna guys they've recruited in the past. But Malik McNeil's certainly going to need some time. He's an incredibly gifted athlete. There's no questioning that. I just haven't seen from a technical perspective. I mean, he's just been bigger than everybody else forever, and that's what makes it so hard, though. I mean, all of these guys have really just rely 80% on their size. Throughout their high school career, that it makes it hard It makes it really hard to project. And this is why getting guys to camp and working with the staff is, I mean, this position may be more important than any other.
Yeah, and I think it is more difficult to scout. Like truthfully, when you look at these things, I think you're spot on, because a guy even came up this week, and that's fits perfectly into Joshua Miller, who's come in, and we've talked about this before. If Phil Troutwine is trying to change the I think the type of player that Penn State goes after when they go after offensive linemen too, where we've seen developmental guys that maybe have the big frame. Then you see what Phil Troutwine is going out and getting of big guys that are already big. There's no fill out about Joshua Miller. And you see that too with J.B. Nelson and Malik McNeil, and especially, as you mentioned, Landon Tangwall. What I've found looking at this is that, considering the last two classes, Penn State has exactly as many top 250 tackles that they've recruited between Tangwall and Drew Shelton. Wherever they end up, they were a tackle when they were being recruited in high school. They have as many as they have since 2016 under James Franklin. So for Penn State football fans that are thinking this offensive line and where it's going and trying to throw some fire and or explosives and blow the whole thing up, it does seem to me like things are trending in the right direction. You're getting the guys at those critical positions. Maybe you're not getting all of them, but you are getting more than you were previously. So that's, I think, a good thing for Penn State football fans to focus on going forward. And then it will become about the development, as we've talked about, of are they right about these guys and are they projecting forward in a positive way from a development standpoint. And that's why I'm very interested. You brought up Olu Fashanu as a prospect. He might be one of those guys that you just need to hit on one of them, right, Ryan? Like we've seen at certain positions. How does it work when you hit at one position and then that guy goes on and has great success? Is that a tangible thing that works in your favor at positions?
I mean, over the span of 3/4 of a decade, yeah. I wouldn't say, if Olu Fashanu goes out there and has a great season next year, that that's going to help them in offensive line recruiting. I would still think that they would point to. Obviously when they're out on recruiting, yeah, they'll be pointing to that stuff. But when it comes to, trying to become a powerhouse tackle program or something like that, it takes longer than that for sure.
Yeah.
But I want to bring up one thing. You showed that list of those misses for last year, 2021. I mean, Nolan Rucci, man. I mean, how big that miss looks so monstrous right now. And really, I mean, again, he would have needed time, like all these other guys, but and that whole class too, Wyatt Malone. I mean, he was somebody that we thought at one point Penn State was going to get. Tristan Lee, Diego Pounds. I mean, Diego Pounds was basically a silent commit, we thought.
I was working on his film room. You were telling me I was working on his film room the night before.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. But yeah, all of those guys. I mean, that sucked last year. I mean, that there was no way else to look at it. I mean, there was some major hits that really, really hurt them. And yeah, I mean, again, it wouldn't have helped this year, but it's really moving forward. If you would have had one or two of those guys in the program, it would have helped a lot. And I think that's a big reason why the portal is going to be so important at tackle now, because if these one or two of these guys would have been in the system, obviously you wouldn't have had as many scholarships for the portal and whatnot. But
right.
Having at least quality guys that you're developing there would really help a lot.
One last thing, I just want to hit on this because, as you mentioned, Olu Fashanu's had a lot of buzz about him so far this season. This is what Caden Wallace had to say about him on Friday during Bowl Media Session availability.
He's just really athletic, and he can pick certain techniques he wants to work on for a day at practice, and he can get some pretty good reps and some pretty good learning reps. And he does it every day and it stacks up. So he's starting to develop.
So I guess I went into this and what I found was that I was trying to understand why Penn State made the change from Matt Limegrover originally. And if you look at the recruiting, some of the bad luck and then some of the changeover they had at that tackle position, that might be Olu Fashanu might be the last part of that springs forward into the next group of players. And I guess it's just really interesting to watch how some of the things you don't see, and there's such a delayed reaction along the offensive line, that what is now was made 3 years ago, especially when it comes to that particular position. Is there any other thoughts you have on Penn State's recruiting of this position going forward with Phil Troutwine?
Yeah, I mean, I still believe Phil Trautwein's a pretty good coach, and I know there, some fans are bummed out, not happy with the way this season went. I think that there are some differences in his room compared to what he wants to do, and it's going to take time. And I think if you would ask a lot of fans, I think a lot of fans honestly wanted Penn State to move on this year, and I think would have been a bad decision. And I think James Franklin did the right thing by keeping consistency there. He's proven in the past, that he's a solid coach. So just that's the coaching side of it. The second side, I would say this is Evan Link from Gonzaga in Washington, D.C. is an incredibly important prospect. Penn State has to land him because what I see from Samson Okunlola, what I see from Luke Montgomery, what I see from Chase Basantis, and a few other national guys, I think it's going to be really hard for them to land him. And Link is the most I think he's the best prospect. Again, I mean, I hate saying, all these things as a surety because, we've seen different things play out over the years. But fundamentally in some things, he's incredibly important. He's pretty well established, and he's been to Penn State a couple times now. So when you're looking at 2023 now, moving forward, Evan Link has to be at the top of your offensive tackle wish list. Luke Montgomery too. I think Notre Dame and Ohio State are ahead. Yeah, and a couple other. I mean, Chase Basantis, he's been tough to read, and Samson Okunlola. Penn State might be in the mix with him. He just doesn't talk, he talks. He just doesn't really visit anywhere, so it's hard to get a read on that recruitment. But I still think Phil Trautwein is a good coach, a good recruiter. He just got Joshua Miller this week. He's got Alex Birchmeyer. I mean, there are some quality guys coming through. I think Matthias Barnwell could eventually end up being an offensive tackle. So if he can put together a good quality offensive line group this for 2023, and then maybe hit on two solid incoming transfers, it would really help. But this is something that's going to take time. And I think if you're looking for, snap your fingers and something to be different in 2022, good luck.
Well, I appreciate you coming on the show today, and that's kind of what I want to do. I want to give a perspective of the long view of how you got here and kind of the long view of how you get out. For Penn State football fans that want to know more about this stuff, I think this is the in-depth stuff that can help you kind of understand all of those things. So Ryan Snyder, Recruiting Insider, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for talking me through this.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas. We'll be back tomorrow with the BWI Daily Edition.